Okay, we're recording. Hey everyone, welcome to Hanukkah Erotica Book Club. I'm Raizel and I'm joined by my co-host and stepsister Malya.
It's me.
Hi Mal.
Hello.
And here on Hanukkah Erotica, we do a lot. We read Jewish romance books.
That's our bread and butter.
That's our bread and butter. Sometimes the occasional short story. Sometimes Hanukkah Jewish romance movies.
Mm-hmm.
But for May, we took a little pause in reading to dive into Jewish matchmaking on Netflix.
We had to do it, really. Like, it was just so much in the zeitgeist, and it was Jewish romance. Like, how could we not?
Yeah, it needed to be done, and I'm so excited about how it all went.
I have a lot to say because there was a big there was the biggest reaction probably to any of our episodes. So
for sure. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Okay, well, I don't know when you wanted to discuss this, but I definitely think we need to discuss our number 1 and number 2 fans' reaction to the episodes.
Yeah, so what was happening on your end? For any of our new listeners, our biggest fans are our parents. Malya and I are married. My mom is married to Malya's dad, and They had an alarmingly strong reaction to our interviews with Eliza and Danny.
They were so happy that it was almost too happy, like I found it mildly disturbing. Like so there was a lot of communication in swift succession. Like, there was a text, then your mom sent an email, then my dad sent an email, then there was another text. But they were all sort of like my dad's email said he was crying tears of pride, which like is so sweet, but also like, I don't know, like, I've had 4 children. Like, I graduated from law school. Like, I don't remember my dad ever saying he cried tears of pride about anything. The fact that it happened with our interview with Eliza, I don't know how I feel about that. I mean, I'm glad they enjoyed it, I guess.
It's so sweet. It is so lovely.
It's really lovely
to have their support.
Absolutely.
It is very sincere.
Completely. How about you? Did you get a similar reaction?
Yeah, so there was a few emails and texts in succession. I think that's part of what felt unhinged to you and I.
They just kept coming. It was like a barrage.
Like, amazing. What you did with Danny and Alina, it was a typo because my mom was writing so quickly.
Yeah, of course.
What you did with Danny and Eliza was amazing, brilliant, love you both. I guess this was an email to both of us.
Yeah.
Next email was probably within a few seconds, also to both of us. Subject, brilliant Eliza podcast. Fabulous. Appa/Arthur can't stop crying. He's so proud.
That's what I was like, he can't stop crying? Like,
it is beautiful.
It's so nice.
It really is. So number 1 reaction from that. Yeah, that's definitely worth recapping. And I'm so glad you brought it up.
Also, I think that your mom wanted to speak with Eliza to just let her know how much she appreciated the interview, because a couple times she was like, what's Eliza's contact information so I can make sure she got my message? And I was like, I don't have Eliza's contact information.
That's so reminiscent of my growing up and like so my mom is a letter writer. You know, now it obviously takes the form of unhinged emails, but she used to be pen and paper.
Sure.
And so growing up, you know, I wouldn't know, but like a random guy who did lighting for the, you know, play that I was in or the play that I wasn't in because I was extremely not talented but interested in theater, you know, would be like, I got a letter from your mom. Or like, you know, the social studies teacher who like I didn't even really have, but like, you know, maybe she ran a club I was in or something, would be like, I got the loveliest note from your mom.
That's
just
really
like
nice.
My whole life was me hearing stories of notes that my mom had written to somebody. So it's funny that this is also wanting to let Eliza know to thank her for doing our podcast. Even though we're grown-ups with like, we're successful grown-ups in our own right, separate from being podcasters having a blast, you know.
Totally.
But yeah, so I think it's very
sweet.
It's very sweet, but and also very, very, very Bobby, very my mom.
Love it.
So like wanting to make sure Eliza got her note.
Right, like to want to write a note to make sure she got the note.
Exactly. I had a lot of feedback. Lots of people were really excited. People loved the episode, by the way. I think people really enjoyed the Danny episode, actually, Molly, even more than I thought they would. Like,
Yes,
I think
yes.
that, I feel like, I don't know. I wasn't sure how it was even going as we were having the conversation with Danny. And like,
Right.
by the way, I don't know how she felt like it went because she did not repost it or anything. Like, I wasn't sure if that was an indicator. Like, Netflix wanted to know when it was coming out. I emailed them. Like, I don't know.
Huh.
But our listeners were very into the Danny
Yeah.
episode, but the Eliza podcast seemed to blow people away.
Yes,
And
that
that
was
was exciting.
the kicker for sure. And
Yeah.
Lisa did story it,
Oh
so I
yeah.
saw
Oh
that.
yeah.
So that
Oh
was
yeah. She reposted. She was very excited. She was just so awesome. She was so lovely
lovely
and
and warm. Yes, absolutely.
gave a lot of insight, and it was just amazing. But one thing I've just been dying to tell you for the past 2 weeks
Oh gosh.
is that I'm in multiple different group chats about our podcast. People have a lot to say. And as I've mentioned before, one of them is with our friends Ruthie and Jonathan and Rachel, who I don't think you know, but Rachel has a bookstagram for all of our listeners. It's Ray Hills Reads. She recommends reads. She recommends really good books. RAEHILLZ Reads. So we were in a group chat about the podcast, about the episode. They loved the episode without even watching Jewish Matchmaking, which I really appreciated. And so something came up, how much does it cost? And I was like, oh, she mentioned that thing about $36. But then I got to digging and I pulled up her website and I found her Google form that you can fill out to actually pay for her services.
Okay.
Okay. And so it's like professional matchmaking services, name, list your professional URL. What are the main reasons for seeking a matchmaker? Lots of different questions. What are your relationship goals? Lots of questions, good questions, very detailed, great.
Okay.
Okay, moving on. I'd like to date someone. I thought this was funny. In my 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s are option 6. But I think it's funny that because like people in their 60s could definitely be interested in dating. Like our parents met when they were slightly older. It's been a while now, so they weren't in their 60s yet. But like
Yeah.
someone in their 60s can date, but probably isn't interested in dating like anyone between the ages of 60 and 100. So I thought option 6 was funny. But
That
then,
is funny.
what is your budget what is your budget for a professional matchmaking service?
Oh wow.
Up to 3,000, up to 9,000, up to 15,000,
What?
up to 25,000, or up to 50,000.
50,000?
To which I said, I'd pay 50K for Mitchie, but
Oh.
really, that is bananas. Up to 50,000.
50,000. I mean, like you'd pay 50,000 for your husband, but you
Now.
Is
But
the
I
point.
didn't.
Right.
But
Like-
I didn't.
Right.
Now.
Sure. Like
I
10
pay
years
more
later.
than 50 for him now.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
but
10
like,
years later when we have a family and a life.
Right.
But yeah, I didn't pay 50K for him at the time.
And you probably
can-
wouldn't have, let's be honest.
not before I knew him.
Right. Like you wouldn't have paid 50K for the option to date people. Like, right. I guess, I mean, this is kind of a good segue to the book that we're discussing, which is, I think, a lot about like the value of a matchmaker.
Right. So yeah, maybe this is a good segue. I think it's incredible that the book that we chose is a book that Eliza was consulted on.
That
I
was
just-
a crazy moment because we had no idea.
We
That
had no idea, and she thought we did. We were
At first, I didn't understand. I thought she like misunderstood and she thought we were reading like her book or something, which I don't think she has. But I was just like, no, it's a random romance novel. But she knew exactly what it was.
She knew exactly, and in the author's note, it said a bunch about her. I was really. I couldn't believe that, but also now having read the book and seeing how there's almost like no such thing as coincidences is one of the values in this book. Like, I don't necessarily know if I believe that, but the book certainly does.
Sure.
That all things happen for a reason. The book sort of has an element of magical realism to it. And so that was a bizarre moment. I couldn't believe it that Eliza was consulted in the book that we had chosen to read next. Very cool.
But are we to take it from, sorry, I'm jumping around, but going back to that survey that you were looking at, are we to take it to mean that her services start at $3,000.
Yes. So then later in that Google form, but again, this is like for the executive matchmaking, professional matchmaking.
Ah,
But I don't know what that means exactly. Then it says later, I'm ready to begin matchmaking services. Dot dot dot. Click all that apply next week, next month. I'm just curious, but not ready to invest. It's out of my budget. I'd prefer something under 3K. So,
ah.
like, I don't know if someone fills out that Google form and then they say under 3K, if they're like, great, I have someone for you. It's 2,500. Like, I don't really understand how this process works. I don't know if you pay the 50K if you get the match and it works out. I don't think I understand exactly.
Does the
Because
50K like include the wedding? No, but I do think
yeah.
like when you say executive, I have heard before about like sort of these elite services that are specifically for very successful people who sort of don't want to date among the masses, I guess. Maybe?
Are you thinking about the Millionaires Club and Patty Stanger again?
Yeah, but I think well no, but I think with that I know people who like have really engaged in things like that.
Maybe that's what this is. I
Right.
don't, I really don't know, because then there's also this free database that you could just upload your profile to. And by the way, somebody that I work with was talking about her adorable nephew who's in his 30s. And, she was like, oh, I got to get him connected with Elisa. He'd be perfect for the show. A lot of people have opinions on that and think that people they know would be perfect for the show. And by the
Sure.
way, I trust them every time. It's like, you people know in their life who's like, adorable and would be great TV, and who they would also love to see set up and happy in a happy relationship. Like, when people say that, I often believe them.
Totally.
But I said to her, oh, well, on the episode, in our conversation, she mentioned that people can always just fill out their, put their profile in her free database. It's a long,
Yeah.
comprehensive survey or questionnaire, but she mentioned that you can do that. He did, and they already reached out to him, and
Wow.
it did make me think, like, back when we were dating, and there was kind of like, maybe there were more women than men. We've talked about this before.
Sure. Shidduch crisis.
The shidduch crisis. Thank you. Him being reached out with so quickly made me think that even in this situation where Elise is probably getting an influx in profiles and
It's
people are
all
really
profiles of like 39-year-old women.
possibly.
Right.
But hopefully Elisa works her magic.
Totally. And she's like scouring for single men in their 30s and snapping them up, which is, what people are paying her thousands to do, I would assume.
Right. So we'll see. We'll see where it all goes. I really hope there's a season 2.
Yes.
And I hope that we have her back on and other people from season. I really hope there's a season 2 and that we continue to cover it. It was really fun watching it and recapping it. It was very fun interviewing them. It was great.
Really liked it. And I think it exposed more people to us. So hopefully, like, that means, more people reading along.
Exactly. So remember, if you're joining us because you were excited about our Jewish matchmaking episodes, do not feel like you have to read the books to be able to enjoy this podcast. As Molly and I said, we often are reading these books so you don't have to. But today we're talking about The Matchmaker's Gift. And one thing I was a little bit worried about in having this conversation is that I just thought it was good. I liked it. And I was worried because it was neither bad nor funny nor particularly sexy. And I was worried as I was reading it.
There was like nothing to hang our sort of tongue-in-cheek like hats on.
Yes, so I liked it. I thought The Matchmaker's Gift was a good book, and I'm really curious to hear what you thought, and we'll dive in.
Okay, so I thought it was a good book too. Like I liked reading it. I listened to it as an audiobook, and I like looked forward to getting into the car and hearing it. I thought it was really well written. I liked the main character. I did think that there were elements of it that were sort of silly.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Like it kind of felt like a 90s rom-com to me, without really the com, just a 90s rom. Like, I don't know, everything's a little too sort of like perfect, and like nothing really seems realistic. And
Yes.
actually, yeah, go on.
Oh, for sure. So just backtracking for our listeners. So the Matchmaker's Gift is kind of like dual timelines. It's telling two stories at once
Right.
of a woman named Abby in 1994 who has just lost her grandmother, Sarah, who she was very close with, and then a dual timeline of Sarah starting at age 10 in the early 1900s on the Lower East Side, and both of their stories.
Yes.
Sarah, at the very early age of 10, kind of discovered that she had the gift of matchmaking at a time where the matchmaking world was a man's job. I did not know the history of that at all.
Yeah, that was really interesting. Yeah, I didn't know either.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that because matchmaking as a profession, ever since I've ever heard of that, like of what a shadchan is, like, it's only been
Yeah.
women. It's
It's like
only been
it's
women.
yenta. Like yeah,
Right.
it's yenta like which is what Eliza referenced herself. Like you think of
Yes.
a woman. Yeah.
Right. So I did not know it was a man's job in a man's world. I just truly never knew that. And that there was a lot of kind of like business surrounding it. It sounds like the author was like really researched it to write that storyline. I know because I talked to her. I'll tell you about that soon.
Oh.
Yeah, I talked to her. I talked to Linda Cohen Loigman, and I'm excited to share with
Oh.
you. Yeah, I'm excited to
Yeah.
share with you what she shared with me. But so it's all about Sarah and this kind of. She almost kept this matchmaking gift that she had a secret because the men in the community were not happy about it. But
But also,
she
let's
can.
just pause to say, like,
Yes.
the matchmaking gift is really described as sort of like a magical power almost. Like,
Yes.
it's not like she meets someone and starts talking to them and, like, gets what they're about and then thinks of another person who seems similar. It's like she literally sees, like, light flowing between two people, sometimes people who she's never even spoken to before. So it's really like the universe or like something mystical speaking to her.
Yes, exactly. There is like actual magic happening in this
Right.
book.
Yes.
And I think that like, there's definitely like elements of magic. Magical realism is kind of a genre in and of itself. There's definitely
Yeah.
books that feel like completely realistic, except for this one extremely impossible kind of magical element. I feel like Isabel Allende writes a lot of books that are kind of have that element to
Sure.
it. But yeah, this for sure had that. Like the matchmaking power was this like flicker of light. It's like very beautiful. But yeah, it's true. It's not like she's talked to the pickle king or talked to the person at the connichery and then felt like they would really get along with the other person they spoke to who worked at the competing connichery. It was about like a flicker of light.
Yes.
Yes.
And I wonder, like, what does that mean? Because, you know, I kind of liked, like, Eliza seemed to take a very practical attitude toward matchmaking. Like, you know, the Jewish idea of she didn't say this, we didn't really discuss this with her, but I think on the show she was saying, like, the Jewish idea of a soulmate, it's like when you marry someone, you make that person your soulmate. And it's sort of like soulmate is something that's developed through, like, of course, there's a compatibility, there's something that brings you together, but she takes a much more like your soulmate is made sort of attitude, I think.
Yes, because it
Whereas,
seems like her whole thing is also mentoring people to
right.
help their marriage and relationship work. Like I think that the dating coaching part of it and the marriage coaching part of it is a big part of what Eliza does, which is kind of what she was implying with the Shia and Hoovy thing. That she
Totally.
didn't make the match for Shia and Hoovy, but she kind of did some coaching to help him kind
Move
of
it along. Yeah,
exactly.
totally. Whereas here, it seems to really be like it's a given of sort of like she has this power. She sees sparks between people. They're meant to be. So, like, by definition, they're going to get married and they're going to be happy.
Right. Right. Yeah, it reminded me of another genre that I think you probably don't know about, which is like there's a very big genre of witch romance.
Oh.
A
I don't, I'm
lot of
not
books.
interesting. Are there any Jewish witch romance novels? That would be a good crossover.
That would be an amazing crossover. I was thinking if we did like a spin-off podcast just on witch romances. I'm not interested. I don't really want to. But if there was a Jewish witch romance, we have to read it.
If one exists, I say we add it to the roster
Yes,
for sure.
so there's a lot of these. Like there's people whose favorite kind of romance is reading about witches.
I see it.
And so this did kind of remind me a little bit, like this had that a little bit of that kind of it had that magical element for sure.
Totally.
So the thing is that Abby, the granddaughter of Sarah in 1994, is a divorce attorney. Right? She's a divorce attorney, and it's very clear it's because like of her parents' divorce, but when she's upset about her parents' divorce, her father literally is like, if you want answers, become a divorce attorney. And then she becomes
Lo and
one.
behold, she did. So it wasn't right. Not the subtlest of plot lines there.
Not at all. Not at all. None of it was subtle.
No.
The whole book was predictable but also lovely.
Predictable, but like done in such a cute. The characters were also likable that you were happy to just watch it go where you knew it would.
Exactly, and the thing is that the story is really not about Sarah and the match that she will ultimately find, or whether or not Abby will find love. It is a part of it, but it's we're more focused on Sarah's journey in matchmaking, Abby's personal growth, and then the matches that they are making. Because it's not until Sarah dies that Abby actually receives the gift. But once Sarah dies, Abby receives the gift of matchmaking and sort of goes from divorce attorney to matchmaker herself. She doesn't even at first really understand what's happening, but it does happen. Right. And the whole book is really about rooting for these matches that they're making in a way. Sarah's made a bunch, making matches. Abby's making matches. Some of those connections from 1910 and 1912 then pop up again in the 90s for Abby. There's a lot of very strong connections of characters and family and generations. It's cute.
Yes, very cute. And I think, like, it's really supposed to be about Abby, like, coming into sort of her more hopeful, positive self that, like, love is real and it's not all about, like, you get the sense like her mom was really shafted in the divorce that she saw with her parents, or that was her perception of it, and she really wanted to prevent that from happening to other people or women, but she was sort of denying the fact that maybe actually, she was good at making connections between people instead of just, overseeing divorces and other type of... It was funny, like, whatever. Whenever there's a book about, like, lawyers, I'm always, like, interested in the details, and I did think it was funny, not that this requires any knowledge of law, but, like, these lawyers seem to spend an inordinate amount of time doing, like, menial tasks that lawyers would never do. Like, they're currying papers around constantly. Like, bring this paper for this person to sign. Like, the lawyer's never gonna, like, go across town in Manhattan and bring a paper for someone to just sign and return. Like, that's how it happens. There's a whole world around, like, paralegals and courier services, and, like, the lawyer's not doing that. It seemed like half of her job was bringing papers different places to be signed.
Hilarious, but also I thought you were gonna say something else, which is, like, a massive violation of confidentiality.
Oh, well, right, that too.
Like, at one point, it's like almost hard to explain to our listeners because there's like a whole convoluted story that if you read, you like really understand. But yes. Abby gets connected with an ophthalmologist that was Sarah's ophthalmologist.
Right.
Also, it was the granddaughter of someone she had set someone else up with. So, okay. But she becomes friends with this ophthalmologist. Also, Abby's working on the divorce or prenup for somebody.
Right.
And she is very concerned about her eyes and like violates confidentiality between her and her client. So, and the client's a celebrity.
Right. They're all celebrity clients, right?
They're all celebrity clients, like extremely well-known people. And Abby violates that confidentiality, talks to the doctor, names her client, and is like, I'm very concerned that she has this eye disorder. Can she come see you? But like, you could just say, I'm concerned about my client. Do you have availability to see them?
Right, you wouldn't be like, by the way, you know who my client is? Right, that's like the epitome of what you're never supposed to do.
Right.
And it was so unnecessary. It was just like a flex to be like, by the way, this is my client.
The lawyer and the doctor both can't do those things. Once it becomes the doctor's patient.
Right. Unless the person consents, I guess, which she probably would have. But right, the initial conversation was totally inappropriate.
Exactly. Also, like, setting clients. She at one point, she has a client going through a divorce, and she's certain that, no, a client who's about to get married.
Right.
She has a client who's about to get married, and she is absolutely certain that they're not going to get married and not right for each other. And while he's still engaged in the process of making a prenup, she sets him up with the ophthalmologist.
Exactly. And what's interesting also, which I thought it was sort of nice, but again, kind of unrealistic in just how kind of clear she was in this magical way about these things. So it's like Abby is dating somebody and she likes him, but there's not huge chemistry. But then she sees one of these sparks and realizes that he's actually intended for the fiance of the guy who her firm has been hired to do the prenup for, who's also a gorgeous supermodel, literally.
Yes,
and
literally a model.
And I don't know. Okay, so listen, I'd love to think that if I were in that situation and I somehow realized the person I was dating had better, was better meant for someone else, that I would just be completely detached and yes, go seek your right person. But I don't know. I think it would be a little more complicated than that. I'd be like, we're dating. I kind of don't, I don't know. I wouldn't you have some kind of a sense of ego of I don't want him to just run off with the supermodel? I'd like him to feel a little bad about it.
Yeah,
I don't know.
This is a scenario that only happens in rom-coms and sitcoms.
Right.
And books. It's not practical. It doesn't happen in real life. It doesn't happen in real life where you're like, oh, person I'm dating, I actually realized you'd be better for this person.
Go. Enjoy.
Exactly. Go in good health.
Right. No. It's going to be a little messier than that.
Definitely.
But it really wasn't for her. She was very no, I saw the sparks. You're meant for this supermodel. Go for it.
Right. And she hadn't felt the sparks herself. Both Sarah and Abby don't know how they're going to know when their match is their match. They're worried because they don't know if they'll see that light or if they don't know or if they're going to then see the light for somebody else. This gift is a curse for them.
Right. They're the lonely matchmakers. Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right.
Okay, so I reached out to Linda Cohen Loigman. She wrote me back immediately. I told her that we're recapping the book and we're really excited. I asked her if there's anything that she wanted our listeners to know about the book or the process, just really anything at all that she wanted to share. Mm-hmm. She said, "You're so sweet. Thanks so much. This book was really inspired by my daughter and her college roommate who came home during junior year of college because of COVID. The themes of Sarah fighting to find herself a place in the professional world came out of our dinner conversations. My daughter's college roommate had a grandmother who was an Orthodox matchmaker in the 1970s, and that made me start thinking about matchmaking as a book idea. The book is dedicated to my daughter and her roommate. Heart, heart, heart. Also, Abby's storyline was so fun to write because I was a first-year lawyer in 1994 also. Thanks so much for including the book on the podcast."
Love that. Oh my God.
Yeah. Then we had gotten into a whole conversation. I was asking her about the research. And when I wrote to her, I had one chapter left. So I actually hadn't gotten to the author's note yet, which is filled with her research. And so she was like, yes, it's all in the author's note. It has a lot of info. So then I read that. And then I had a little bit more to talk to her about. Because one thing I was curious about was why it was in the 90s and not modern day. Why? And she said it had to do with lining up their timelines. Because one thing I thought was nice was that it was pre-websites and apps.
Right. You really don't hear from that. And actually, and I wanted to mention this to William, who's our producer, and I thought would like this detail, which is that toward the end, and this spoke to how well researched the book was, because at the end, so basically the people who Abby sets up, wind up realizing they are for each other, and the couple that were originally going to get married are both we realize we belong really to other people, and they both at this big star-studded bash single out Abby as the person who is a very special attorney and caused it all and is so great. So Abby starts getting deluged with all these people contacting her, and one of them is this guy named Gary who's just starting a website called Match.com and wants her to be involved in starting it up. And she very quickly is just I don't know what that is. Like, I'm not interested. And that's the end of it. But it's so funny because I happen to know from William, who did a cartoon for this guy, Gary Kremen, who was like one of the pioneers of the early internet and started Match.com and
Yeah.
Sex.com and a bunch of other like early websites. But she just mentioned him as Gary. And I was like, whoa, she really knows what she's like. That was
No, no,
cool.
that's really cool. I'm going to ask her about the Gary thing, but definitely this was very well researched.
Yeah.
It really, really was. Yeah, she said that the timelines had to do with wanting to make she started with Sarah and she wanted the timelines to feel authentic. So, she knew Sarah, it had to do more with Sarah's timeline and it fitting along.
Right. She couldn't be like 130.
Yeah, exactly. She knew that, she was a lawyer in 1994. She knew she could make that authentic. And the thing is, like, you know how I feel about the city or whatever city that the books are set in to like really feel like a character in the book. And the way that Linda wrote the Lower East Side in the early 1900s and the way that she wrote the Upper West Side in the 90s was really, you could just feel it.
Yes.
It was just very descriptive and I thought just great. I thought she did that really well.
Totally. There was that great scene where they gathered in the conference room to watch the fireworks on the East River. It was just like a nice description. You could really picture it. That really made the book, like I said, even when the points in the plot were sort of silly, you were just like enjoying reading along.
Right, totally. Like the seeing Shakespeare in Central Park.
Right.
The Lower East Side, like all the pickles and knishes, like you know how I feel about when food's described in a book, but like I could totally like taste this and smell the food. I want to talk a little bit about like that base din scene.
Oh yeah.
So there's a part in the book where Sarah is actually getting into a lot of trouble for making matches because her matches are successful. She's sort of doing them in secret. Even the people who she's setting up don't necessarily know she's setting them up. So for example, she knows that Sam the grocer is a good match for this woman Beryl. Maybe she works at, I don't remember where Beryl worked, but maybe she was a teacher at the school.
Oh, yeah, her teacher,
Yeah, her teacher. And the first way that she gets Beryl to even notice anything about Sam was she brought Beryl a peach from Sam's grocer, like the most delicious peach. Beryl's like, what a delicious peach. And then she says it's from the grocer over on Grand Street. And then she tells Sam, like, change your apron. You look disheveled. And then, she goes to the grocer and then he kind of freshens up because this woman bought peaches and strawberries and he wants to impress her. So she's making matches without the people even knowing that the matches are happening because of her. But because so many successful matches are happening without the matchmakers in the community, the matchmakers start to realize. Like, they know.
Right. That someone's tampering with their business.
Exactly. So she's called to the, like, court, but why did I think we don't have that? Like, can we get a little history lesson on that from you?
For me, we definitely do still have it. Yeah. I mean, it's like, I think, it's like anything in a community. Like, I think it worked really in its prime when Jewish communities were like closed communities. So they could really have authority because it was like, if they said no one can patronize your business, then no one's going to patronize your business. Like, and you were really bound by that. I think now you kind of have to agree to be bound by the court, and the court needs to have some influence over the community that you're in order to be able to sort of enforce any kind of judgments. But it definitely happens.
There's Jewish community, and the authorities are rabbis, a group of rabbis making decisions.
It's usually it's supposed to be 3 rabbis. They're usually like there's Beit Dins that sit, like, that are a particular 3 rabbis. They're like the Beit Din of whatever, and they have a certain reputation, and you can, if you have a dispute with someone, you can summon them to a Beit Din, but they have to come. Like, they have to sort of, but if you're in the same community, then they will come because you sort of don't want to run afoul of the people who are, like, prominent members of the community. So,
so she goes, and she wins.
Yeah, she wins.
She wins. It's ruled that she can continue making the matches. And the only thing she needed to do was return this bracelet that she once got as a thank you for making a match. And at the very end, at the end of the book, that bracelet ends up coming back to her granddaughter. Because everyone's connected in the book.
Right, and I don't know enough about like how Beit Dins are actually operated, and I don't know if there's. I'm assuming they each have their own kind, because I in the book it was like all of a sudden all these women kind of like stormed in, and they were like, now we get to speak, and it was like a lot of the women who she had made matches for who were like sort of defending her. I think like in an Orthodox Beit Din, like women I know can't testify, but it didn't seem like anyone was necessarily testifying formally. They were all just sort of like speaking up from the peanut gallery, and I don't know. I don't know how accurate that was of a Beit Din that would operate at the time, but it was fun. It was a fun scene.
It was a fun scene. I don't know. Also, in that scene, there was someone in the background encouraging the women, to advocate for her and speak up on her behalf, who ends up being her basher, the guy who the man who she ends up marrying, Abby's grandfather. Like that whole storyline is related to that. Like after that, when she wins and is able to continue making matches, and she ends up thanking him, like their love connection begins, including their spark. Something that I was just reminded about when I said the word disheveled.
Oh, I have a modern day example of a Beit Din, actually.
I want to hear it.
Here in Brooklyn, where I live, in Grand Army Plaza, they have a menorah lighting every year, and they always used to call it the world's tallest menorah. World's tallest menorah, and they would like go up on a cherry picker and light it. It was like super high, and then all of a sudden they started calling it the world's largest menorah, and then apparently I had heard that another Chabad, it was from a Chabad, and apparently another Chabad in like Manhattan was claiming they had the tallest menorah and summoned this group to a Beit Din, and there was some kind of disagreement that ended with like one of them getting tallest and one of them getting largest.
That is incredible.
If anyone knows more details about this, please let me know.
Amazing.
But because there's the family who run the Chabad in Park Slope. A couple of their daughters, I think, are listeners to this podcast.
Because our Chabad Rebbetzin here in New Jersey, she sent me a text. I'm listening to your podcast now, and about Elise. It's so great. So the Chabad Rebbetzin here, she listens. So Malky, if you're listening, I feel like our menorah and our lighting was also really big and involved some kind of giant ladder or something. So please weigh in.
Yes, and same
Chabad
thing.
rabbis and Rebbetzins and children of Chabad rabbis and Rebbetzins.
Please, we need this info. Yes.
We do need this info, and we will follow up in our next episode.
Totally.
Okay, back to what I was saying was that
yes.
A few seconds ago when I said the word disheveled, I was reminded about something that I don't think you and I have ever spoken about. Maybe you've spoken about it with our parents, but first of all, as an aside, this book had a lot of Yiddish in it. It was sprinkled in. Some of the Yiddish was sort of defined. Some of it wasn't. I thought it was really nice. But there was also a word in the book that made me laugh, because do you have words in your life that are English words that for most of your life you have thought were Yiddish words? I have a few.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Can you think of some off the top of your head?
Yeah, the first one that comes to mind is tea lights. The tea light candles. I always thought that was like a Yiddish word for like little candles. And then I saw them in just like a regular little store, and I was like, oh.
Yeah, tea lights. That's hilarious. I've never heard that one. There was a word in it. There was a word in this book that's my mom's word. She always thought, shit was Yiddish, but is English. It's tumult.
Oh, that's funny.
Tumult's a good one.
Yeah, tumult.
So I was
laughing.
Sounds
Yiddish. Yeah.
It sounds like Yiddish.
Totally.
Disheveled is mine. And I also heard someone once say ladle, which made me laugh. Ladle really does sound like Yiddish.
Ladle, yeah. I've heard someone say far-fetched. Far-fetched.
Oh, far-fetched. That's such a good one.
That's a good one, yeah.
So anyway, the DMs are open. If you have words you always thought were Yiddish but are actually English, it's something that's high on my interest list.
It's a good list to maintain.
I love talking about those words. Ladle, really disheveled. Tea lights is the funniest. I've never heard that one.
Tea lights. Because I only ever heard anyone talk about them like in the context of lighting candles.
It's also like used in I feel like a wedding, or like someone like is setting up like an engagement and they put like 500 tea lights.
Of course, you're totally right.
Yeah.
Another one. William's reminding me also an urn. Like An urn, I think in the regular world, like you put the ashes of someone who's been cremated in. But like an
Yes.
urn that you would
Like a
like you
Shabbos urn.
like a Shabbos urn, like I don't think people say that.
Of course they don't say that, but like I almost think it is. I don't is it real English? I mean, it's that thing is not called an urn
It's
to
not called
anyone.
an urn?
I
Maybe
don't
that
think.
is what that's like from Glish or
I
whatever.
don't know. I don't know. I'd like to follow up on that too because
Okay.
I don't know, what do they call it? A hot water heater? Like maybe it's an urn to everyone, but I
A
don't think
hot
so.
It's not an urn?
I mean, everyone we know would call it an urn, but for anyone listening, we're talking about this like big thing that you keep plugged in and it heats water. Also, sometimes you could have like you wouldn't have coffee on Shabbat, but like at a buffet or something, like at breakfast. I feel like it was like filled with coffee in my life, but like I don't know. Jews call it an urn. Is it Yiddish? Is it English?
It's a secondary, it's probably like William saying it's a secondary English definition. Right. It's like
Possibly.
number two, maybe.
Possibly.
Right.
So
But
yeah,
it's
so
like the
anyway.
primary one in like a from household, which is just funny.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, tumult was in the book. There were some Yiddish words I never heard before in this one. Altamoid,
Altamoid. What is that? I don't
which
even know what
was
that is.
old maid.
Oh, old maid, old maid. That's cute.
Altamoid.
Altamoid.
I had never heard that before, and I mean, I like hearing things for the first time, but I definitely never heard that, which I, thought was cool.
I think there were a couple of Yiddish words that the narrator of the audiobook I was reading mispronounced. I'm pretty sure she said chosen, like for
Oh,
chassan.
instead of chassan, for sure.
Yeah.
I read this and listened to the audiobook, so you're right. She said chosen instead of chassan for groom, and the thing about the way that she narrated Sarah and Abby, I thought was interesting because she made them sound like very old
Right.
and tired and exhausted.
Right.
And in any other book, like they were Danny Bergman's age. Like when we
Right,
talked to
right.
Danny,
Right.
like when we talked to Danny Bergman, like Danny Bergman was like a young wild child in her 20s.
Yeah, it was like up till 4 a.m. out partying. Right.
Just like taking shots, wearing a hectic hat, selling her hectic hat on social media. We're like, Danny, when we were talking, when like I don't know if you ever have this where like you kind of feel like young at heart and, like you kind of feel like, I don't know, youthful. And then you talk to someone a lot younger and you're like, oh, actually,
Yeah, I'm old.
I'm almost
Right.
40.
Totally.
Like that kind of thing.
Yep.
Danny Bergman made me feel like ancient.
Oh,
like,
yeah, totally.
You know what I
Completely.
mean? Like generally I feel really young and youthful and young.
Right.
But like Danny's young.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah.
the characters in this book were in their 20s. Like they
Right.
weren't old. Even like Jessica, the ophthalmologist I keep referring to, kept being
I
like,
also
does he
right.
know I'm 37? I'm 37. Does he
When-
realize I'm 37?
I couldn't believe she was 37. I was imagining like a woman in her like 50s at least. And then when she was like, I'm 37, I was like, what?
But see, I think that is because of the narrator. Like probably the majority of books you listen to are narrated by Julia Whalen. I don't know if you ever noticed that Julia Whalen is a very popular audiobook narrator.
I think I have noticed that now that
Yeah.
you say it. Yeah.
Okay, it's like so-and-so, this is Julia Whalen,
Julia-
narrated by
yes,
Julia
yes.
Whalen. It's always
Yes.
Julia Whalen.
Wow.
This was not Julia Whalen, and I feel
Right.
that Julia Whalen would have done a better job. I don't think she probably doesn't have the Yiddish. Like I think it has to be a very specific kind of audiobook narrator, audiobook actor, voice
Right.
actor to be able to like use all this Yiddish, because generally these two, it was two, by the way, two narrators.
Yes.
Generally they did a really good job on the Hebrew and the Yiddish and all the, kind of like Jewish words sprinkled in.
Totally.
But there was something about the way they narrated that made the characters seem ancient.
Yes. Totally.
Exhausted
Right.
old
Sighing,
people.
a lot of sighing. Yeah.
Yeah, but like they were Danny's age, Danny Bergman.
So funny.
So yeah, I definitely noticed that. But reading it was good too, because the thing is, the author's note was not in the audiobook. The author's note that I keep referring to that had a lot of information at the end,
Right.
it wasn't there. And so she basically in the note from the author at the end talks about what happened during the pandemic and starting to do the research. She did a lot of research. There was an article that she had read about. She read about the Pickle Millionaire, the Knish Wars, like all these things that were woven
Wow.
into the book
It's all
were real.
Cool.
Yeah. Just tons. She actually has a whole reading list of books that she read and articles that she read that kind of prepped her. And then she talks about how she contacted and connected with Eliza to learn more about the art of matchmaking. And it's really, really, it was her author's note was interesting. And if people want to check it out, I totally recommend it.
Cool.
And then there's acknowledgments with all the people that kind of helped support her. But after she and I chatted, she must have then gone on to our Hanukkah Erotica Instagram, because then she wrote to me again and she was like, "Oh, I just saw that you had Aliza on. I spoke with her when I was researching. She was so lovely. I love her on Jewish matchmaking." And
Oh,
I said, she told us, and we couldn't believe it when we told her what we were reading next. She was amazing on the podcast. She said, she's a unicorn. They couldn't do that show without her.
oh.
So yeah, everyone's an Aliza fan,
Everyone loves Eliza. She's like won over. I mean, I think even people who are critical of the show, and I've met a couple, like can't help but say she seems lovely.
100%. Like it seems like people love her. And I think it's really cool that we read a book about matchmaking to wrap up our whole May that was focused on Jewish matchmaking. I did want to read a handful of Amazon reviews to you.
Great.
Some people really liked it on Amazon. A lot of people couldn't put it down. This I thought was interesting. Does this mean what I think it means? This was the type of book. This is Megan Trankler on Amazon. This is the type of book that you will want to read more than once. Sensitively romantic with modern day and historical day practices. A nice Christian read as well.
Huh?
Is she saying?
What is she saying?
Is she saying like it's sneeze? Like is she saying it's a nice Christian read? It's like
it's
there's no
appropriate
funny
for
business.
a religious audience. I was like, surely she can't believe it's a Christian, literally a Christian book. It was pretty.
Right.
But
It's
right,
a
I get
very,
it.
very Jewish book.
It's sort of biblical-ish. Like it's old. It's modest. I think you're right. That wouldn't have even occurred to me, but I think you're right.
I think that's
funny.
what she meant, which I thought was kind of funny. There's
Right.
one that I loved that I can't find and I'm dying to find. But basically, it was like I was so ticked off when my husband came to bed because I was in the middle of reading it and loving it, and I didn't want to have to turn off the lights. But like the idea of a woman reading like a book about like mystical, magical matchmaking.
And she's like, "Get away!"
And then being like so ticked off
Yeah,
that your
yeah,
husband's coming to bed, just like it made me laugh.
Yeah, it's funny. Get away!
People,
I'm imagining other people being happy.
but people really seem to love this book on Amazon, and also on Goodreads. And I would say to our listeners, like if books with dual timelines, like it reminded me of some other books that I've read, like The Lost Apothecary, or there's other books that have two timelines, like The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo.
Oh yeah.
There's a few books. I mean, I'm sure there's tons of books that have these two timelines going on at once, but it was definitely an easy book to read. It was really enjoyable. As I was saying, I was like almost panicked reading it because I was like, it's just kind of good, like just enjoyable. It's cute, but I'm glad we got to talk about it and get a little bit of a history on matchmaking, on the Beit Din. And,
yeah. It was there was a lot to talk about, and it was a great segue from Eliza for sure.
Oh, definitely. The last thing I'll say about this book that I thought was also important, that I think she wove in intentionally, was that while most of her matches were the right match, there is a part of the book where Abby's reading Sarah's old journals and discovers that there is someone that she suspected was in an abusive relationship, and basically like works to get her out of the relationship safely.
Right.
And so, while matchmaking is really important to Sarah because this is the gift that she has and she's like really excited to be able to support all these people in marriage, she also very clearly, it's in the book, was supportive of a woman when she discovered and even just suspected that the marriage that she was in was abusive. And, thought that was important that Linda put in the book.
Absolutely. I liked that part.
Yeah. Overall, I recommend it. And the other thing is, like, is it a romance was one thing I was curious about.
Right. It wasn't really it wasn't really sexy.
Certainly not. And it was romantic. Like,
yeah,
it was romantic, but I feel like, and there was a happily ever after, I would say.
But the real stories are about like Sarah and Abby finding their callings more than really any of the matches. Like that's what you're most invested in. So I wonder if it even is a romance.
For sure. at the very end,
Right.
you know, I really don't want to spoil it.
No.
I
We'll
don't
leave
want to
it.
spoil it. Something very beautiful happens at the end. My
That
eyes
was a,
did well.
that was
My
a
eyes
sweet
did well up.
ending. That was a good tie up. Really good.
I guess one last thing I want to say on it is that there are these kind of like sayings, and what do we call, like, what do you call
Right, like aphorisms, like
Yes.
yeah.
like little ditties?
Yeah, little like wisdom, like pieces of wisdom, I guess. Yeah.
Yes, that are woven in. Sometimes they're the name of the chapter. If they are the name of the chapter, they then like get woven into that chapter. It's often things that Sarah, her grandma, had once told her.
Right.
But I really, really liked them and appreciated them. Like, he bakes lies like they're bagels, or the thing about there was something about teeth, like when a thief kisses you, count your teeth. There's just like a lot of that sprinkled throughout the book.
That's fun. That was fun. Everyone loves
And
those like colorful Yiddishisms.
I
Yeah.
really, really, really appreciated it. I thought that it really enhanced the book. Like, a drop of love sometimes brings an ocean of tears. And then, you know, obviously the one on the very last page, which I'm not spoiling, but I thought was very beautiful. So I thought that really added to the book. It's definitely, it's like sweet, easy to read, well written, but also has depth. And yeah, I recommend it. I thought it was really, really nice.
Same.
So, Mal, we're wrapping up May.
Yup.
Next month is Pride Month. And we thought that to celebrate Pride for all of June, we're going to be reading queer Jewish romance books. And I'm really excited about our next one. By the way, tons. There's tons to choose from.
I know. You were sending me you were like, we could do this or this or this or this or this. I was like, wow, geez, yes. There seems like there's a lot.
I cannot believe the genre that we have uncovered and discovered.
There's just material for years. Like it's
unbelievable.
We're at the tip of the iceberg. It's crazy.
We are. So we're reading Knit One, Girl Two, and Other Stories, a collection of sweet F/F romances about women reconnecting with art, music, and inspiration. It's a book with 3 short stories. We're going to be reading Knit One, Girl Two. Love the knitting pun. It says this. Small batch independent yarn dyer Clara Ziegler is eager to brainstorm new color combinations. If only she could come up with ideas she likes as much as last time. When she sees Danielle Solomon's paintings of Florida wildlife by chance at a neighborhood gallery, she finds her source of inspiration. Outspoken, passionate, and complicated, Danielle herself soon proves even more captivating than her artwork. So that's our next read. Knit One, Girl Two. Have you ever knit?
I've crocheted, never knit.
Okay.
It's related. You?
Yeah, it's related. Yeah, I learned how to knit in college.
Oh.
Okay, do you know when you walk into our parents' house, there's like a sculpture, and on the sculpture is like a teeny tiny, almost like a green yarmulke?
Oh, yeah.
That was meant to be a full-size hat for an adult.
Oh, your mom put it on the like erotic sculpture, and they're all
yeah, exactly.
Adorable.
Exactly. Okay, so we'll talk more about knitting and yarn dyeing. I would say that for our listeners, some like to read along. This definitely has the vibe I just read the first couple pages, but like it's about an independent small batch yarn dyer. And so like I feel like it has that sort of whimsical indie kind of vibe that we saw in Hot Rabbi, possibly.
Love it. I'm imagining like Zooey Deschanel as the...
Yeah, queer Zooey Deschanel dyeing yarn.
Great. Love it.
It's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. We're also really excited about our second book of the month, but we'll reveal that in June on the next episode.
Absolutely.
So if you're reading along, Knit One, Girl Two by Shira Glassman, available on Kindle, very affordable, and we're excited to recap it in June. So happy Pride Month, coming up in June. We're closing out May with a bang. We're wrapping up Matchmaking. Great month, and we'll see you all soon. This podcast is produced by William Levin, amazingly, and we're so grateful, so I wanted to share that. And artist by Galdor, but she doesn't really want me to share that, so.
Right.
Fan
she doesn't
club by our
listen
parents.
because there's too much talking. I know we talked about that earlier, but it has to be said again.
If you're listening, Gal, we love you.
We really do. Thank you. The art's amazing.
The
Everyone
art
loves
is
it.
amazing.
So good.
It is. Good night.
And we now have a pod page.
No.
We have a
yes.
pod page where you can find us on Spotify, on Google Podcasts, on Apple. It's all in one place.
And we also got a really good review on it.
Yes.
Which reminds me, last thing we'll leave you with, please rate us if you like us. Please leave us a review if you're not related to us. Follow us on Instagram. Join us in conversation. Let us know what you want us to read next.
Please.
And we're really happy that you're on this ride with us. Bye, everyone.
Good night.